Next is the firstborn son, Robert. However, we never called him by his given name. Our grandparents and parents called him Sonny. We, the younger siblings, called him Koyang. This was respect. Koyang quit the 7th grade to help support the family. He first worked in the plantation fields and later worked with Papa as a carpenter. Koyang was meticulous in his dress and appearance, and his lack of education did not hinder his personality. He spoke fluent Tagalog and Pampangan dialects. He also mastered the Japanese language, besides the English language, a remarkable accomplishment for someone with only a 7th grade education. During World War II, Koyang was drafted. After basic training, he was assigned to the Army Mapping Service deep in the tunnel of Cunilla, located a few miles from Schofield Barracks. He received rapid promotions before the war ended. He then worked for the Navy at the Pearl Harbor Field Pumping Station until he retired for health reasons. Only after the children were all grown and out of the house did he marry. He married a widow, Emily Tiano, and they had one daughter, Jonarine. Emily had 4 daughters and 3 sons from her previous marriage. Koyang died in Honolulu from diabetes and arteriosclerosis. I can't fathom the thought how lonely he must have felt to see the younger ones marry and make their own way. To my knowledge, he never complained. He gave up his youth and the better part of his life for the family. We, his brothers and sisters, owe him so much. Next came Monica and Rosa, twin sisters, who were born on May 4th, 1923. Monica is the older of the two. The family referred to Monica as Dolly because translated Dolly means doll. The story to relate here is that both Dolly and Rosa were born with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. It was very difficult for them to wear shoes, and Papa had to cut the shoes to accommodate the extra toes. At about the age of 5 or 6, they were hospitalized and the extra fingers and toes were removed. While driving home from the hospital, another car passed them at a high speed. In it were plantation workers. Further on ahead, Papa came upon that car where it had crashed and rolled over. Papa saw that the men inside were critically hurt, and he piled them into the back seat of his car and raced them to the hospital. It is believed that a couple of the men died in Papa's car. After this, his car would always have a flat tire, so Papa traded it in for a newer car. Dolly took violin lessons from a Professor Velez, who came to the house every week. She eventually gave it up after a few years. In their teens, Papa bought the twins Filipino dresses and entered them in popularity contests during the intermission of the Filipino movies. All the young girls in the Filipino dresses would line up on the stage for the contest. The twins won many awards, and the family was proud of them. However, Papa kept a watchful eye on the girls and saw that nobody flirts with them. Dolly married Milton Espiritu, and they had 3 children, Andrea, Milton, and Thomas, before they were divorced. Later, she married Anacleto Ayanon. Added into their family are Roy, Ronald, Alina, and Robert. Dolly was an outgoing person and worked well as a volunteer for the welfare of senior citizens. Rosa is the younger of the twins. I guess you can say that she was the most talented. She loved to play the piano, and while she practices, she also taught me voice lessons, and we would sing Tagalog and English songs. She was also the organist for St. Michael's Church in Waialua. It seems that the choir loft was for the Reyes family because we all sang in the choir. Rosa too worked at the Army Laundry Service and later worked at the Pearl Harbor Naval Yard. Rosa married Stephen Tabarango, and they had 3 boys, Theodore, Fred, and Benjamin. At the Navy Yard, Rosa and Dolly were always asked to wear their Filipino dresses to help sell war bonds. No one wore bikinis or bathing suits to sell bonds in those days. After the war, Hickam Air Force Base, where Stephen worked, was downsized and the family moved to California, first to San Bernardino and then to Sacramento, where the Air Force had employment opportunities for Steve. In their waning years, Steve and Rosa were always ill. Steve was admitted into a convalescent home, and Rosa was hospitalized. Rosa probably felt that her time on Earth was drawing to an end, so she checked herself out of the hospital, went home to pack, and made her way back to Haleiwa, as sick as she was. She told no one that she was leaving. She even had to lay over in Los Angeles in a wheelchair. Not long after, she died. Not many hours after her death, Steve also passed on in Sacramento. Rosa is buried in Hawaii, and Steve is buried in Sacramento. Benigno was the second son born into the family. The family called him Ben or Benny. He was sort of different from the rest of the siblings in that he exerted great confidence and daring. He was the only one with wavy hair, and he had a carefree personality. He was always out with his friends and Papa would get mad at him. In those days in Haleiwa, the tourists rode a train around the island, and they usually stopped at the Haleiwa Hotel on the banks of the Anuhuli River. There was a glass-bottom boat there that took the tourists sightseeing in the bay. Ben was one to jump off the bridge, dive into the water for coins that the people threw into the river. He was also a great pool player, and he usually made a lot of money playing pool. He was drafted into the army during the war and saw action in Europe. When he came back from Europe, he married his high school sweetheart, Dulce Mejia. He made the army his career. He also fought in the Korean conflict and was wounded there. Ben and Dulce had 2 sons, Benigno Jr. and William, as well as 4 daughters, Yolanda, Norma, Pricilla, and Annette. Benny took his own life at Fort Bliss, El Paso, Texas, in June 1960. He is buried at the Punchbowl National Cemetery on Oahu. After Ben came Josie, or Josephine. Josie was one of the green thumbs in the family, and she was always working in the garden. Her industrious nature gave her the idea to set up a fruit stand in front of our house. Since the army soldiers and their wives had to pass the house to get to the beach, she always made a sale. She was one of the best cooks in the family also. She worked for the Army Base Exchange after graduation, where she met Frank and Elisa, whom she later married. She was also a wife of a career soldier. They had 4 children: Linda, Frank Jr., Lucille, and Lilia. They lived in Waihawa until the children, all grown, moved to the mainland so as to be close to their children and their grandchildren. Frank and Josie made their home in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where they hosted one of the family reunions. Josie was widowed in 1997. Frank died of a heart attack right after the San Diego reunion. Next came Marcelina, 2 years younger than Josie. She was named after Mama, and we call her Marcy. She was also called Diding by the family. Like the rest of the siblings, with the exception of Koyang, Marcy graduated from the Wailoa High School. She worked as a telephone operator in Wahiawa until she married Mariano Agricola. Mariano worked for the Wailoa sugar plantation. By that time, Mama required much care due to her diabetic condition. Marcy was one of those who looked after Mama. Marcy and Mariano had 4 sons: Mario, Michael, Miles, and Maurice. Shortly after Maurice was born, Mariano died suddenly of a heart condition. Mariano, Marcy, and the boys were visiting Helen when he was stricken and he died on the way to the hospital. Marcy has great love for the boys and was a wonderful single parent in the upbringing of her sons. Upon her death, Marcy was laid to rest beside Mariano in the Punchbowl National Cemetery.